operated was through thinking. Their thought life was predominantly how they learned and understood the world, as opposed to the Jew who was reared in a Hebraic understanding of life, which came more from doing. So the Greek would learn by reading, by learning, by thinking. The Jew would learn more by doing. And so Paul here is saying to these predominantly Greek believers in Jesus, saying, may the Lord make your love increase. Now, what that tells me is that it was possible and necessary for them to have a greater capacity to love. Do you see that? I mean, I don't know any other way of interpreting that, translating that, or understanding that this morning, except when Paul says, may your love increase, is that the idea and the hope is that it would be more, that it would expand, that there would be more capacity, more room for it. Does that make sense? If somebody says, hey, I hope that this increases in your life, it means that you hope they get more of it. And these are very necessary words for you and I believe. And he reiterates it. That's why I believe it's so necessary. Even in chapter 4, he reiterates it. In verse 9, he says, now about brotherly love we do not need to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love each other. And in fact, you do love all the brethren throughout Macedonia. Yet we urge you, brothers, to do so what? More and more. There it is again. The idea of increasing, of expanding, of loving more. And I believe that this is a message that I've really been living with in my own personal life. Not just in the last few days or this week, but for years really. In attempting to increase my own personal capacity, not only for loving God, but for loving others. You know, I've encountered a whole lot of people in my ministry that I would say they love the Lord. But I'm not sure how much they loved anybody else. I'm just saying. You may have a different experience. Can I just speak from my experience? Speaking from my experience, I know a lot of people that find it very easy to love the Lord, not so easy to love others. Others you got to live with, right? Others you got to get along with. And I just found that there was a disconnect. But I remind you that when Jesus said the greatest commandment is this, love the Lord your God with all your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. He joins them together. He connects them. He doesn't separate them. He doesn't disconnect them. But he says that we are to love God and one another. Amen? Amen. John would write in his letter that it is impossible to love God whom you don't see and not love your brothers whom you do see. Am I quoting that right? Those are sobering words. Those are words we're considering because we've got a whole lot of, now forgive me here, unless God enables them, unless God empowers them. We know what love is because God first loved us. So it has to start with God. There was a little object lesson I wanted to share with you this morning. We did this in VBS this week. You know what this is? Balloon. Yeah, it's a balloon. But this is also what my heart looked like before the love of Jesus came into it. It's true. It's what it was. Right there. But one day, Jesus came into my heart. And he's been teaching me to love ever since. Somewhere along the way, my heart looked like that. That's better, isn't it? That's an improvement. But is it really the fullest capacity that could be there? It's increasing, isn't it? It's becoming more and more, isn't it? And we could continue to do that, couldn't we? Increase. And would be more and more. And so I'm hoping, I'm praying, I'm believing, I'm trusting that my heart looks more like this today than what it did before. Amen? Amen. And when you tie that off, I don't want to let all that air out. That would defeat everything.
Attaboy, Wally.
Let me boil it down this way. I would hope that after 20 years of being together, that I love my wife more today than I did 20 years ago. Now, let me say this, because when I was sharing with some of my